Joining us via Zoom for this conversation is the CEO, Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited, Mr. Kabiru. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for joining us on the show this morning. It's our pleasure to have you. Now, this is a continuation of what we've been speaking about yesterday because this is on the lips of every Nigerian. We know that in 2002, Boko Haram started in Maiduguri, and since then, we've seen a lot of cases. You wake up one morning, something has happened in Borno, another morning, something has happened in Plateau, and you wonder, are we getting used to this violence, and are we really fighting this insecurity in Nigeria? Recently, we saw that President of America had said that there's a genocide happening, and then he had given a threat as well to Nigeria, saying that if you do not fix this, our military will now take over. Nigerians are worried all over the world, the ones in Nigeria and the ones in diaspora. But I just want to start with, right now, where would you say that our security intelligence is? What are we doing to really protect Nigerians in rural areas and Nigerians everywhere all around the world?
Okay, thank you very much. That's a very packed statement, but let me try and unpack it. We have a Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act, which was amended in 2022, which defines what terrorism is in Nigeria. It also defines what acts constitute terrorist acts in Nigeria. It also defines how a Nigerian company, individual, can identify who is a terrorist group, as an example. And by that, it created what is called a sanctions list, where the names and designations of anyone who is associated with terrorism would be, put as in a reservoir, so to speak. And as a Nigerian, if you are interested, you can go to that reservoir and check if that individual. But more importantly, it also provided how an individual, an organization, can be put as part of that reservoir. In other words, the legal processes for identifying who a terrorist is. So I think it's very important that we start with that. Whatever America does, it's American. But Nigeria has its own laws as a sovereign country. Yes, we're part of the global community. We're also part of the terrorist alignment that is fighting terrorism globally. But I think it's important for us and everyone to realize that as a sovereign country, our laws are sovereign, so to speak. Yes, as part of the global community, we have to recognize especially multilateral laws, conventions, and things like that we sign to. But another country cannot impose its own laws on us, except if we go to it and we want something. So I think it's important to start from that. Based on this background that I've set, at the moment, we have about 6 groups that have been identified as terrorists in Nigeria. Starting from the Jamaat al-Ahl Sunnah lil-Dawat wal Jihad, which is, as you rightly indicated, started from the northeast of Nigeria, Yobe and Borno State. Then over time, it split into about 3 groups. The main group, which is the one I just mentioned, Jamaat al-Ahl Sunnah lil-Dawat wal Jihad, and then the Islamic State in West Africa province. And then, of course, there is also the Ansaru, which is the 3rd group. But then there is also the Lakurawas, and then there is also the Mahmudawas, and the controversial ones, which is the indigenous people of Biafra, that has also been designated as a terrorist group, even though a bit controversially. So these are, at the moment, the current groups that are designated terrorists in Nigeria. But then there are other groups that have come into Nigeria to carry out attacks, but they are not Nigerian-based groups. So one of them is JNIM, that claimed an attack recently in Kwara State. Now, whether that is true or not, it remains to be confirmed. The second one is Al-Shabaab, which is based in Central Africa. But then, according to the DSS, it was behind the attack in Ondo State, in the church in Owo. And again, I'm quoting the DSS. So I think it's important that we kind of have that global focus. In terms of where we are with the terror campaign in Nigeria, I think we've done very well in terms of progress, but unfortunately, there is still a lot that needs to be done. Okay. At the moment,
go ahead.
Let me just All right. According to the data from my company, 8,000 Nigerians have been killed as at the end of September 2025. Out of that, about 3,000 are the result of terrorist attacks across the country in all of these locations that I've mentioned where we have terrorist groups, about 3 or 4 regions in the country. Now, if you compare to, let's say, 2014, which was the peak year for terrorism in Nigeria, when about 8,000 Nigerians were killed, even though we're still in September, we're not yet in December. If you compare 8,000 to 3,000, it's progress. But like I said, it's still work in progress. I'm hoping that one day when we're having this conversation, we'll discuss only 100 Nigerians or less that have been killed as a result of terrorism.
In fact, I'm looking forward to a situation where we'll not have we'll not have this discussion at all, because we're not having terrorist threats anymore. And now, from what I gather, you like data. You know, you like data a whole lot, and that makes me happy, because you can paint pictures better with data. Using data, could you show us how successful the effort of the federal government at curbing insecurity has progressed?
Okay, let's start from the beginning of the year. What we had in terms of numbers, and I'll use fatalities only, not all the other metrics that we could measure. By fatalities, I mean the number of people that die from the various conflict dynamics and threat vectors that we have in the country. 1,000 Nigerians were killed in January 2025 at the beginning of the year. The peak for this year was 1,300, which was around April this year. But the good news is that as from April, the numbers started coming down. By May, it was 1,100 thereabout. And by September, it had reduced to 590. So clearly, if you compare to the peak period, which was 1,300, and then to the beginning of the year, which was 1,000, with now what we had in September, the numbers are dropping. And this is an incremental decrease that we're seeing over 4 months. Now, what we saw in the past, and I must, with all sense of responsibility, mention this. What we saw in the past was a month-to-month fluctuation, where we would see an increase, and then we see a decrease, and then the next month we'd see another increase. But this time around, we're seeing an incremental decrease over 4 months that I think deserve commendation. I'm an independent organization. I'm not associated with the government in any way. And this is what the data is saying. When we looked closely at the data to ask the question, why are we seeing this decrease over a period of 4 months? And we were able to identify 2 major factors. Number one is an increase in precision-led attacks. It appeared to us that the intelligence gathering capabilities of the Nigerian security enterprise, which we hopefully will discuss as part of this conversation, what I mean by security enterprise. It appears that the ability of that enterprise to collect intelligence and use that intelligence to achieve precision-led attacks had increased. What that meant is that we were seeing bandit commanders being killed. We were seeing terror leaders, commanders being killed. We were seeing their supply chains being destroyed in Northeast, in North Central, in Northwest, more than what we are seeing in previous periods. Additionally, we also saw an increased utilization of assets in terms of the synergy between the various forces, military, police, and name them. There was more synergy, which was leading to more successes. And then the third point was the introduction of the forest guards. One of the core elements that had remained almost stagnant over the years was what we called ungoverned spaces, where the threat actors will stay. They would come out, carry out attacks, abduct people, and then go back to that base. But then the introduction of the forest guards now meant that their ability to stay in those forests was reduced. So those were the 2 key components that we felt were leading to this incremental decrease over at least 4 months that I've mentioned.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Kabiru, for your input. Honestly, I'm so glad that you're here today, because I truly believe in data-driven storytelling. We must start with correct numbers. Now, unfortunately, in Nigeria, what we know of terrorism often comes from conflicting of fragmented data sources. I mean, government figures, NGO trackers, and open source intelligence, they rarely align with one another. My question to you is this: how can we build a centralized and transparent data system that really reflects the reality of what's going on ground? Because accurate data is the difference between life and death for our men on the front line and for people in Nigeria.
No, definitely, and which takes us to this unfortunate spat between Nigeria and Washington. And for those of us in intelligence, we can tell you that it's all about data. If we had marshaled our data and used it judiciously in the manner that diplomacy would allow us to use it, maybe we would not have been where we are. On a light note, I'll urge President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to sit me in a room with his security chiefs, who I would say, unfortunately, I'm not sure why, seem to have this, fear of data. Data should not be feared. Yeah, on a serious note, that was a joke.
Why do you say that?
Because they are not using it adequately. It took me, at the risk of, anyway, for national purposes, I'll mention this. It took me less than 10 million naira to set up the platform that I used. Wow. And that, is supporting what I'm doing. I've seen budgets of up to billions of naira over the last couple of years dedicated to that. But I challenge anyone who can go to any of the security agencies and bring out, visualizations of data in the manner that I'm bringing them out in my organization. Anyone who is in doubt should go to my website. We have a dashboard there. That dashboard has been there. It's comparable to any across the world. Again, this is a challenge. Anyone can go there, look at it, and compare it with what you find in the US, what you find in Europe. Over time, we've had to increase our capabilities, including introducing AI. Now, I also need to mention this. Data collection and intelligence gathering are two different things. Yes, as part of intelligence cycle, you can gather data, but the cycle has different components to it. And this is the part that I said I'm hoping, I said it on a light note, but now seriously, if President Bola Ahmed Tinubu can put me in front of his security chiefs to discuss this issue so that they understand the process of intelligence collection from gathering up until dissemination, how modern data collection capabilities can support us. I'll use the example of the Ukraine-Russian war. When the war started, one of the sides, thought it was going to be a ground offensive, and then went ahead to, build its arsenal for a ground offensive war. But today, OSINT, which is open source intelligence, taught the other side that no, this war cannot be won by ground offensive. It can only be won through outliers. And one of the outliers is unmanned aerial vehicles. So today, anyone who has been monitoring that war will see that it's not a ground offensive. It's an air kind of competition over the usage specifically of unmanned aerial drones. And where did that advantage come from? Specifically from open source intelligence. So we cannot discountenance the importance of open source intelligence, especially where in today's world, we live almost about 80% of our lives on the cyberspace. I doubt if there's any of us here who does not have a phone, who does not spend, all you need to do is take your phone and see the average time you use on your phone. And this is a challenge for everyone who is listening.
Dr. Adamu, let me come in here now. Quite an eloquent elaboration you've brought to us based on data, which I know Beacon Consult, you're pretty big on that. Thank you so much for that. But there's something you mentioned. It took you less than 10 million to set up a data collection structure and machinery. But then you also said that over the years, you've seen government budget more than that in the same course. However, insufficient result in the same matter. Could that be the reason why the United States would stand on to give us such a label that they've done, bringing to our awareness, in quote, the level of insecurity in the country? Even though we've gained some grounds from what you've told us, and that is not on the table of President Bola Tinubu, because this is years before now. Are we speaking to political will and security will here on our part as a country to truly put the elephant leg on these grasses?
What we're speaking in simple terms is an absence of accountability within the security sector. We can go round and round and round it, but it comes back to that. If you look at the 2025 budget, and kudos to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, we're speaking of near about trillion naira, and that's just at the federal level. If you look at other components, including the security votes that the federal government gives the states, and then what the states themselves also spend on security, the amount could be more than 10 trillion naira in security alone. Now, I want the listener to comprehend what this means. If you go to health, we're speaking of about 1 trillion naira. If you go to infrastructure, it's also less than that. If you go to education, it's also less than that. So what this means is that a significant percentage of our budget is going to security. But are we seeing a concurrent result in terms of progress? The answer, unfortunately, is no. And to unravel this, it speaks to accountability, which is why part of my recommendation is that we need to enhance accountability within the security sector. Yes, you've asked for money, and we understand what you are using that money for. Security is expensive, especially when you have a war. But then how are you using that money? Are you using it to go and build a university in Biu? Did you use it to go and build a swimming pool in a command center in Abuja? Did you use it to buy bulletproof vehicles? What did you use that money for? How is it that in spite of this 6 trillion naira, you still have your frontline troops in soft-skinned vehicles, so that if an enemy uses an AK-47 to shoot at them without the protective gear that they need, they're going to die. Now, this is what we need to speak to as a country. And that is perhaps what the US is trying to force us to do. Now, I hate to say this, but the atrophy that has led to where we are is an atrophy that is rooted in lack of accountability. And almost about 80 to 90% of the fault lies in the National Assembly. The National Assembly has responsibility for appropriation. The budget is submitted to it. It goes through that budget. It has oversight responsibility. It also has the capacity to review our laws. So with these three functions, the National Assembly should have been able to, with all due respect, put pressure on the executive arm of government. Now, that national security enterprise that I described is in the executive arm of government.
Exactly.
The National Assembly, by virtue of these principles of doctrine of separation of power, which is what democracy is rooted in, should have put pressure to ensure that this accountability that we're discussing improves over time. We cannot be, what the analogy I can give here is that we're using basket to pack water. How long would it take for you to
and let me just come quickly here because of our time. Some time ago, the governor of Zamfara State, Dauda Lawal, had said that he knows where the kidnappers are, he knows where the bandits are, he can put a call through, but he would not because there are some agencies that he has to follow through. But then we're hearing a governor say that he knows where they are. But this is not even my question. I worry because right now, some of these bandits have become very bold, that they come out and even make videos. There has been conversations that should we continue negotiating with these bandits, because the more we negotiate, the more we give them, the power over us. So I just want you to quickly touch on this for me. This conversation on X has been a serious, debate. Should we continue to have conversations with these bandits? Does it give them a lot of power? And are we getting used to the violence in Nigeria?
Two terms that I use, which are generic terms. I use the word atrophy. I also use the word accountability. The reason why the US is putting pressure on us is because it believes that the state, with all due sense of responsibility, is condoning the violence. And one of the best indicators, and most unfortunate of them all, is this, peace pact that we're having with bandits. As Nigerians, we can assume that we're doing it for whatever reason, but the international community is looking at us. How much of a failure of governance would lead to having a peace pact with bandits. In other words, legitimizing their violence and not just having the peace pact, allowing them to keep the weapons that they had. So I think, again, like I said, I use the word atrophy. We can use the next 24 hours to unpack that word atrophy. We can also use the next 24 hours to unpack the accountability element. But in simple terms, this is part of the reason why the U.S. thinks the state is condoning.
But quick one, I want you to really touch on the question. Should we continue negotiating with these bandits? Does it give them some sort of power? You know, just quick one, just help me with this question, because there's been a big debate.
I mean, I've answered it by saying that we're legitimizing violence, and no state should legitimize violence. Yes, I believe in negotiation. I know that it can play a role, but that negotiation must be guided by principles. Those principles include not legitimizing violence. It includes making sure that you de-weaponize the threat. It also it means that you must institute elements to make sure that there is the deterrence element in our laws is upheld, so that tomorrow another group will not come and pick up weapons to say, I need you to talk to me, that's why I'm picking weapons. We're not doing that at the moment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kabiru Adamu.
Thank
you so much. I must thank you so much, Mr. Kabiru Adamu. Thank you. This was amazing. Now go there, so say thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you. All right, so after the break, we will focus on the leadership tussle in the PDP and what this means ahead of the 2027 election. Don't go anywhere. Stay with us.